Mike, we lost them. I can't believe they were going to throw this out.
Not on my watch.
Guys, what's going on?
Like, I think that's pretty obvious, Fred.
Duh.
The gang's all here, they're on the case, and there's no ghost that they wouldn't face, 'cause they dig it, Scooby-Doo. Yeah, they dig it, Scooby-Doo.
Hey gang, and welcome to another installment of a podcast named Scooby-Doo Extras. This week features an audio commentary with Be Cool Scooby-Doo story editor Jon Colton Barry, who will be talking over the pilot episode of Be Cool Scooby-Doo Mystery 101. Now, the whole point of doing these commentaries, these episodes with bonus features, for lack of a better word, it's basically a response to Warner Brothers not doing anything in this regard. And for a show that's been around for almost 50 years, you'd think that there's an older fan base. There's a fan base that's interested in the minutia, in the behind-the-scenes stuff, who want added value content, and Warner Brothers just not ponying up. The last time they've done anything resembling an audio commentary on a Scooby-Doo product was back for the DVDs of Legend of the Vampire and Monster of Mexico, where they had Casey Kasem and Frank Welker doing commentary in character for both of those movies as Shaggy, Fred, and Scoob. And that commentary was sporadic and not, as informative as you would maybe hope it could be. It's in character, so they're talking about food, they're talking about what's on the screen. I think they basically just sat the two guys down for like 70 minutes and had them just riff. And as fun as that is, it just doesn't satisfy the bonus feature geek in me, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. So you look at shows down the line, you look at Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, you look at Be Cool Scooby-Doo, different takes, slightly more sophisticated writing, and in some cases a combative fan base. I think these are ideal scenarios for Warner Brothers to actually go ahead and do bonus features. I know it costs money. It's probably why they don't do it, but you gotta spend money to make money, right? And if you're trying to sell your optical media, if you're trying to sell DVDs of Scooby-Doo MI and Be Cool Scooby-Doo, you gotta put something on them. You can't just put the episodes, not when they're available through iTunes, through Netflix. There's so many different avenues to get these shows. Unless you do a little extra, your optical media is obsolete. And maybe that's a point they're trying to make. Maybe that's something that they themselves believe, and they're just kind of waiting for that market to fade away. I don't know. I still personally love my physical media. I like having packaging. I like having artwork. But I'm a collector. It's important to me. Maybe I'm not everybody, but that's just the way it is. A long time ago, somebody once told me, if something doesn't exist, make it for yourself. So that's essentially what I'm doing. That's essentially what I have been doing. Anytime I get the opportunity to talk with somebody who's worked on one of the iterations of the show, I give them the opportunity to come on and do a commentary, talk about their experiences, and it gives us a behind-the-scenes perspective that we might not get through an interview. There's more of an immediacy listening to somebody talking about what they're seeing on the screen, and they may think of things that they may not think of things in interviews or that get prompted by questions, and we get the added value content that we've been really wishing we could have. So it's kind of a win-win. And now I just have one more bit I want to address before moving on into the commentary segment of this episode. And that's basically just to say, there's been some conversation recently about how these commentaries are going to be released, because with the first episode that I did, the Tom Conkle interview commentary, I had the commentary sort of planted right in the middle. Tom and I talked before, watched the show, and then we talked a bit after. And I understand if you're listening in the car or you're jogging and you've got your earbuds in, you're listening to your podcasts, you maybe don't want to listen to the commentary right in the middle of the interview. You may want to actually have the show in front of you. It's a scene-specific commentary. You should have the specific scenes playing while you're listening to it. So rather than doing that and then isolating the commentary and releasing it later, for the people who are actually listening to the interviews, I'm going to throw them a bone and I'm going to leave the commentaries out of the interviews. Just release the interview separate, release the commentary separate, separate, and I think everybody will be happier that way. And conveniently, it just sort of, the logistics of this particular commentary and interview with Jon played out that way because we weren't happy with the original commentary, as I've probably said many times before. And this commentary took place kind of several weeks after doing the interview, so it made it easier to just kind of cut it up that way and release it that way. Although, to be fair, this extras episode is actually going to be a lot longer than it kind of normally would be because it'd been a few weeks since Jon and I had spoken to each other, and we just watched the episode, and we just kind of started talking after the episode. So there's like another 20-minute interview tacked on to the back end of the commentary. So it's kind of like an unofficial part 3. Most of the conversation is sort of specific to content from Mystery 101, which of course is the episode we just watched. So it's a little more focused, a little less broad than the part 1 and part 2 interview pieces, but I don't think anybody's going to complain. I certainly didn't, and you shouldn't either. So, having said that, having gotten everything out of the way, we're going to move into the commentary segment. Cue up your Netflix, iTunes, DVD, whatever it is you're using to watch. Mystery 101 is the episode. Get everything to the counter of 000000. Enjoy, and we'll see you on the other side.
Hello?
Hello to you. I have a weird accent now. Bo. Whoa! What'd I miss?
Alright, so we're here doing commentary with story editor of Be Cool Scooby-Doo, Jon Colton Barry.
Hi.
The episode we're doing this time around is Mystery 101, which was the pilot episode of the new series. Thought it'd be great to get Jon in here to talk a little bit about kind of where the show began. So we're going to do a quick countdown as we always do with the commentaries, and if you're using optical media, put it in your machine, get it set up, and pause the show here. We'll wait for you. And if you're using digital media, just cue it up and hit pause. And I'll count down from 3 and say go. And then everybody can hit play and we'll be good to go.
I am at 0, so I'm ready. I'm ready for your countdown, Mike.
All right, so if everybody's at 0000, we'll start counting down at 3, 2, 1, go.
Yes, this is Mystery 101. This is the first episode. This was for a 22-minute, which these are. The normal length of a script is about 28 pages because there's a lot of action and description and these sorts of things. We tried to hold it at 28, but my original draft for this script was 65 pages long. And Warner Brothers thought I had sort of lost my mind and didn't know what I was doing. But the whole idea was, we were still developing and finding the show, finding the tone, finding the characters. And that process really helped because bouncing it off Warner Brothers, off Zach, we found what was working for people, what was not working for people. And moving forward with the next scripts, I had a much clearer idea of what would make everybody happy. And there was a lot to accomplish here. Here now, we're establishing the characters or new characterizations. And like all shows, we talked about this earlier, sort of how we sort of came about developing the characters to where they are now. But some stuff sort of falls away as it evolves, and some stuff expands as it evolves, certain traits. Velma here, we're establishing her intelligence. She's a genius. But we're also establishing, there's puppets, in a strange comedic tone. With Fred, he's sort of the control freak. And also we're trying to establish his sort of an eye-rolling attitude towards Daphne's antics. The puppet, my puppet of me is a puppet of me is a puppet of me. It's called the Drosty effect, actually, like the mirror within the mirror. I love that little bit. And with Shaggy and Scooby, it was a matter of trying to establish the fact that they're going to be handling the slightly more absurd and surreal humor. They can break the laws of physics. They'll be, slightly broader in tone than the rest of the gang. And then Daphne, of course, the biggest change of all. She is the least like any iteration of Daphne ever. And here we see, in the original version, we had kept the danger-prone Daphne idea, and we have her here, making a mistake and establishing that the Mystery Machine now has Inspector Gadget-like, little tricks to it. And I love Gray's read here with the accent. The blah, blah, blah. Gray Delisle did such a fantastic job with this Daphne. She is so very, very much like this character. She's really, really funny and eccentric, and understood immediately what we were trying to do with her, and she had fun with it, and I think it comes through in the performance. Again, establishing Elias Kingston University was a callback to one of the original Scooby-Doo Where Are You episodes with Elias Kingston, where he was the monster, the ghost in the show, but they didn't say, we don't know anything about him, so we sort of gave him a backstory and a context in this episode as an homage and a wink to connect this series to the original series, which was the whole idea was this is an updated version of Scooby-Doo Where Are You, sort of ignoring everything in between. We really went back to the beginning. And there was a big learning curve, in terms of what would work and what wouldn't work. We found out that these secondary characters like Joe here, that all the secondary characters sort of needed one little comedic little gimmick to them. So we gave him this whole tactics thing, and that he's really, really bad at camouflage and hiding and stuff like that. And it was always sort of tricky to find a new little thing for secondary characters, but that just became one of the challenges of the show was keeping everything funny, everything moving. Warner Brothers had a sort of an attitude, which is common in animation aimed at younger audiences, which is dialogue is death, which is something I don't particularly believe in. But and here we see sort of Velma's social anxiety was one of the big traits we want to give her, and some of the dialogue got cut, but her great fear was having to go to an interview and actually talk to somebody. She had gotten in automatically to all the other colleges, so the confrontation with people and having to speak to other people is really what was frightening her. And this is a scene with a lot of exposition and stuff like this. So all this little bit with Shaggy and Scooby in the picture was added later because they were afraid that you've got people talking. What? Kids their heads will explode and the earth will catch fire and the gods will smite us if people talk. So we had to sort of create physical comedy in the background because of the fear that characters giving exposition or humor coming from dialogue would just be dull to kids, which again I disagree with. I think kids are smarter, more sophisticated, and distracting from important plot points that are said verbally is sort of a silly idea. But I think we managed to find something that didn't get in the way too much. The whole bit with Daphne and the puppets, this came out of the little 2-minute test that Zach and I made for sort of proof of concept for the show. Once we had come up with the idea, the Daphne du jours, as we called them, and they call them Daphneisms online sometimes. The first idea, I just wanted to go really big and silly and have her have puppets, but there's always a method to her madness, and she's using the puppets to sort of help the gang understand themselves and each other, and because she's having fun. And so we created this 2-minute test scene that will be coming up and then we actually, used it. We built the episode around that 2-minute test scene, which we thought, showed all the elements of the show, the tone, the character, the comedy. It was a little bit longer than the scene as it is in the episode, but it is starting right here. This is where the 2-minute test actually began. With the puppet over the wall and everything like that. I think Zach did a great job with the design on the puppets. He wanted them to be just very, very simple and silly, and they're just funny. The puppets are great, and this thing with the Mystery Machine I thought was a lot of fun. But this was literally the first stuff that was written and animated for the show. This little bit. And crossbows. And we're establishing these things. This is called the Velma mind sequence, or the Velma mind's eye sequence. This is how we wrote them in the script. We just thought it would be cool if we got to see the inner workings of Velma's mind represented, visually. We do it again later in the library where we see sort of the numbers of the books coming out at her, and it was something we had to keep in mind. Oh yeah, we need to remember, those bits to show Velma's mind's eye and these things, because there's just so much to service in one of these episodes. You have mysteries and secondary characters. You have 5 main characters, each with little runners and storylines going through. There was a lot to deal with. So these were always very, very tough shows to write, and this became the template for it. This episode, sort of showed how we can do it. And here we have again Shaggy and Scooby breaking the laws of physics that sort of only they can do. As we talked about in the first part, Shaggy and Scooby, and this thing with the puppet going over. We never wanted Fred to be angry at Daphne for any of the things that she does. He sort of stoically accepts that this is Daphne and he adores Daphne, but it does bother him because he wants to stay focused on the mystery. He's very practical. But it was very important to make sure that he was just sort of annoyed, if anything. But he's never really, he doesn't hold her in contempt for what she does. This again showing Shaggy and Scooby's ability to break the laws of physics, to have props and pull in other things and do comedy that the other characters don't, because of the problem of creating a comedic ensemble, making Fred, Velma, and Daphne funny. Shaggy and Scooby, who were previously the comic relief, if they had just remained at where they were originally, we would have sort of lost their humor. They wouldn't have been as funny as the rest of the gang, who were more dimensional now and were more, they were real characters. So we sort of tried to raise Shaggy and Scooby proportionately and give them, more abstract, surreal, absurd humor, break the laws of physics, break the fourth wall, and a lot of this stuff goes back to vaudeville and they're old comedic ideas, but sort of recontextualized, and so they feel sort of new in this context. and Shaggy and Scooby again. We talked about this. The first problem I found in trying to write the show was Shaggy and Scooby, are pretty much in everyone's mind's eye the main characters. They're Scooby-Doo, Shaggy and Scooby. But when you're writing stories, Shaggy and Scooby are two characters who do not want to be in your story. They don't want to solve mysteries. They're afraid, and so, keeping them involved and interested, it was always a trick. And then food jokes, trying to come up with new food jokes. It was the bane of my existence. And so we have here the infamous vending machine scene, which was my first attempt at trying to explain to Warner Brothers how we're going to try to find new food jokes and what we're going to do with them. The little ding that they use, that sound effect, I think almost makes the scene. The scene would be probably 50% less funny, I think, if those little dings weren't there. It was just a great touch. And it's always so nice when the script is passed on and everyone's at the top of their game and they're all plussing at every level, something like this. And it works really, really well. And this whole idea of run when they're all just sort of trapped, and then faster, it's just a funny little bit, and it worked well. There was, and we're always walking that line of not undercutting the scariness or threat of the monster. So he can look sort of silly in some places, but most of the time, it's very important to Warner Brothers in particular. Here we see Velma's mind working, but it was important that the monsters are monsters, that they're scary and they're sort of old-fashioned. And this little bit with Fred and the wits joke, I thought it was funny. I thought I was actually proud of the joke when I wrote it, and months later, someone, I think on Twitter, asked if I had gotten it from Stephen Wright, the comedian, and I didn't know what he was talking about, and so I looked it up, and I found that it's Stephen Wright also thought of the joke. Stephen Wright has that joke. He's not afraid of heights. He's afraid of wits, and I was mortified to think that someone thought I would think I have stolen a joke from Stephen Wright. So we referenced it in another episode, but then pretty much sort of dropped it because I hate the idea that anyone would think that we were ripping off other people's jokes. It is a funny joke, and this is the first romp. We're reintroducing the idea of the musical romps. This is a song I wrote with Greg Camp from Smash Mouth and Zach. The original version, we actually there was a melody and lyrics for this song, but time constraints, we didn't get a chance to record it, so we just left it as an instrumental. But there's a full actually version of that song. And here, is the low point scene where we see sort of, and we tried to do this in most episodes, the Daphne's du jour comes to the aid and saves the day. Something about it, ends up contributing to either, solving the mystery or getting everyone back on track. And this is what she's doing here. We see, that, basically it's puppet therapy that they do with children, that they're learning to think like each other and see each other from each other's perspective. And there were several passes on this scene to try to get it right and get it to feel right. Keep it simple, but sort of make it understandable. And I think it's a nice little heartwarming scene. And it shows, one of the criticisms that bother me the most, because it seems extremely lazy and might be from people who aren't really watching the show or paying attention, is that we dumbed Daphne down, which which I think we did just the opposite. I think we made her creative and brilliant and eccentric. I mean, she's a little naive, she has that Rapunzel aspect to her, where she grew up with wealth and privilege in a very protected environment from her mother, and so she didn't get to do a lot of the fun things kids do. So now that she's out with her friends, she's, unapologetically enjoying things she never got to do, and she's just Daphne, and hear her roar, and she doesn't care. And this bit with Fred, again, being afraid of wits, the second part of it led to one of the most ridiculous and funny meetings and arguments I've ever been involved in, where exactly what it meant by Fred being afraid of wits became the issue. And for me, it was the widths between the two buildings. There was a long expanse that he had to cross to get to the other building, and that was the widths. So that would be sort of the vertigo would be he had to cross that long expanse. But for them, they thought it meant that the ledge he was walking on wasn't wide enough. But that wasn't the issue as far as I was concerned. But I lost that argument, and it was the dumbest argument I've ever had to be in my life. This is the great ultimate sacrifice puppet moment. We were sort of thinking of Gollum in Lord of the Rings. I think in the original temp music we actually used that music from Gollum's fall into the fire pit. The way Sean shot this, and to the quick shot of it just splat on the thing, sort of anticlimactically, was just great. There was a college student who wrote me. She was writing a paper about irony in television, and how this one scholar was saying that since the Mary Tyler Moore Show, television's just become increasingly ironic. So now it's only about television. It just references itself. And she was thinking about Scooby-Doo, that Scooby-Doo sort of is eating its own tail, as it were, and this show, this version of the show is ironic and winking at the audience. And I disagree. I think the references to itself, we were aware that people have seen other iterations of Scooby-Doo, and it's a beloved franchise, and we wanted to let people in on that joke and sort of honor them and homage them and let them enjoy sort of the tropes of Scooby-Doo, but sort of poke fun at them where they're sort of silly or funny. Later episodes where we have them all jump on Velma and she runs with them. Like, it's such a horrible idea to do that. I don't know why, but we sort of make fun of it. And but irony to me means that there's a lack of sincerity in what you're doing, that it's missing sort of a heart. And I think that the show had a lot of heart, and it it is self-referential, and but it really is about the characters, and it's very, very character driven, much more so than any other iteration. Even the stakes of solving the mystery affect the characters. But here, like, making fun of the meddling kids lines as we do, and I'm very pleased with this last little bit of the sad, awkward Dean ending here. And the holding Scooby to 4 words only always worked well. And there we go. Wade Wazinski, the brilliant Wade Wazinski line producer. Jake was a fabulous music guy. Kyle Stafford, the editor of the show, also wrote a bunch of them. Just a wonderful crew, and this was the beginning. It was super fun. We honed it, and the show evolved from here. But everything about it was there.
Well, thank you so much, Jon.
You're welcome.
That was fabulous. I actually I found it difficult not to laugh out loud during the vending machine scene and the I swallowed a button scene.
Yeah, I love I Swallowed a Button. It just his read on that is just so sad and pathetic, but like just so right. Frank Welker's a genius, just brilliant. But when we talked about this in the first bit, one of the most difficult things was trying to get the actors, and Colette, just fabulous, the voice director. She knows what to say to an actor to get what she needs from them, and it almost seems counterintuitive sometimes. She'll want a certain read, and she'll just say, "You're surrounded by idiots." And the next read, even if the context of the scene is not that they're surrounded by idiots, but if they say it as if they were surrounded by idiots, it comes out perfect. And she just knows all these tricks. It's astonishing to watch her work. But even she was sort of taken aback by the speed at which we needed the dialogue to be read. And again, it's sort of going back to, a lot of the comedy that I was influenced by, certainly pre-1980 comedy, but going back to vaudeville and the Marx Brothers and Your Show of Show and Sid Caesar, early Woody Allen, early Mel Brooks, who were both writers on Your Show of Shows, Monty Python, a lot of people who came from sketch comedy, where each scene sort of has a comedic beginning, middle, and end, and sort of a point onto itself. That's something we tried to do. But like Who's On First, those old routines where the dialogue is quick and snappy and fast and moving. And that's the way it was written and was the intention for all the reads. And getting the actors, I would do the scratch for every script I wrote. I'd write it and I'd go down to Kyle's office and I'd sit there and read, and I'd act out the script. I'd record myself doing the whole script so the storyboarders can begin boarding it before, whenever the actors are scheduled to do their record, the production can still move forward because they have, the scratch voices so they can time it out and start getting the animation. And I would read it at the speed at which I felt it needed to be read and which the comedy worked. And the actors and Colette would listen to my reads and they'd look at me with horror and bemusement because it is really, really fast. And I'm a sort of a marbled mouth person. My dentist, told me I have a small mouth cavity, which is, that's my opening line on any first date because, the ladies love it. That's about as sexy as you can get. Hi, I'm Jon. I have a small mouth cavity. But words do not, form in my mouth as clearly as they do in others. But, I felt if I could do it, they could do it. And eventually, they got up to speed and then it just became second nature to them. They understood immediately. And I'd say by the fourth or fifth episode, they were just boom, 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 boom. Which is why we lost a lot of dialogue. A lot of stuff was edited from the first couple ones simply because things weren't moving along fast enough. But again, it's a learning curve for everybody.
I never really thought much of the speed until you had mentioned it when we spoke in the interview. And now when I watch the show, I pay attention to like the cadence of the speech and everything, and it does move fast. It's kind of deceptively fast, but when you're paying attention to it, you realize just how much of a clip they're moving at.
Yeah, and we even, we will sometimes suck out the air. We'll edit the lines closer together even to get it moving faster, or we'll even speed it. We'll pitch it up, 10% doesn't really sound, doesn't change the sound of the voice to chipmunk quite yet. So we'll even speed up some of the reads if we need them to be a little bit faster. You could see Matthew Lillard going a mile a minute sometimes because we sort of Groucho Marx-ized Shaggy a little bit. So he's supposed to sort of have that Groucho-y rhythm sometimes, and Groucho talks a mile a minute. It was unbelievable sometimes watching how fast Matt could go when prodded. He'd do a read and just look up and go, "You want it faster, don't you?" And then boom, just they were flying. And Woody Allen actually said this. He said that he does a lot of just sort of master shots where everything is one shot the entire scene. So there's no cuts, so he has to do it over and over again. And so they'll do the scene maybe 10, 11 times. And even if the scene turns out right, he'll say, all right, that was great. We got what we need. Let's do one more, but just really, really fast. And so the actors would do the scene one more time, but really, really fast. And he said 9 times out of 10, he'd use that last take. He'd use the fast take because there's something about a specific kind of comedy, a specific kind of attitude that just works better played fast. And, that's what we were aiming for.
You mentioned the proof of concept while you were talking, and there's a lot of things in this episode. I mean, I still think it's one of the best episodes of the series, even though it's the first. Usually the first kind of ends up falling behind or by the wayside after a while. But there are some moments in it that do seem very pilotish. Mm-hmm. The Shaggy and Scooby sort of defying gravity, it's kind of an obvious moment, and It's not something that I can think of in any other episode where they do that to such an obvious effect. And I was wondering if you were just kind of trying to hammer all the points kind of in that first episode, and then as you went on, you just came into like a more natural flow with those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's almost precisely it. I mean, again, I started out with 65 pages, so there was so much more there. And we lost some stuff that I loved dearly, but everybody has a different idea about what defines Scooby-Doo, and everyone had sort of a different idea of, obviously subjectively, what's funny, what's not funny. And so, I threw a lot of stuff at the wall just to see what would stick and what would not stick. And so, I was happy to get the vending machine scene in there. I think the stuff with them, saying, whoa. So you're saying you want us to, I've heard some criticisms from some people saying a scene like that went on a little bit too long, but I'm sort of a fan of things going on just a little bit too long. I like the Family Guy chicken fight scenes. I mean, those have been long enough as far as I'm concerned. I'm a fan of that sort of idea. And so I love little tangents and stuff like that. But gravity bit, it is a little obvious. Conceptually, though, I love the idea of Shaggy and Scooby both jumping into one another's arms. Just as an idea, that was funny to me. But where you go from there is sort of, obvious. So yeah, we tried a bunch of stuff and established a bunch of stuff, and then just began fine-tuning, The second episode written for the series was Party Like It's 1889. And, we still had not really nailed down the formula sort of for the show, any sort of structural formula that I'd be able to articulate to any of the other writers. We were still sort of finding it there, although I think that one was a really great character story.
That's the episode that gave us Lady Bethabeth. How can you?
Yeah. Lady Bethabeth. And I love the idea of Shaggy and Scooby, when there's no danger, that they actually have absorbed quite a lot of mystery solving skills. And they find that they're sort of good at it, and it gave us a chance to explore the characters by giving them, like Fred's costume puts him in direct conflict with everything he's about. He has to be bad at solving mysteries on purpose. And Velma has to follow rules. She loves rules, so she cannot break character. And she's a scullery maid, and the scullery maid would not be walking around solving mysteries. So she does her job, but yet still she's so brilliant she solves the mystery anyway, because she pays attention,
I think those moments, like, I think they're so subtle or obvious in the way they play out, because you set up, Fred has to do the opposite of what he is, and Velma's kind of doing the opposite of what she is. But I think a lot of people miss just how much kind of character building is in there, because, Shaggy and Scooby, realizing that they'd actually absorbed a bunch of mystery solving skills, if they weren't afraid, they had that capability of actually being effective in the course of solving things. And I think those moments might be underrated as far as how a lot of people perceive the show, and you mentioned the dumbing down of Daphne and stuff like that, and sort of what they are. I don't think people realize how much that shows character. I think they just they take it for the joke, and the character stuff sort of flies under the radar or maybe over the heads. They don't realize some of the sophistication in the writing there, or some of the kind of what you're doing? You know what I'm saying?
I hope they don't. I mean, hopefully that stuff's invisible. You know, hopefully they're just absorbing the information and they're just enjoying the show and they're laughing and they're learning about and hopefully falling in love with the characters. You know, we did some fairly bold stuff with these beloved old characters, and we changed them quite a bit. We changed the dynamic, and so it was very important to sort of introduce aspects of their personalities, play those contrasts in that particular episode. By showing what Fred's worst fear is, we learned so much about Fred, you know. If the joke sort of seems obvious early on in the season, it's still very important because we have learned so much about Fred through that process, you know. So hopefully, you know, what if there is any sort of nuance and intelligence and grand scheme in the writing, that's just, you know, I'm gratified that you noticed it, but, you know, hopefully it's invisible.
Anytime I want to sell anybody on the show, Mystery 101 is kind of a go-to for me.
Uh-huh.
And this is basically just a pat on the back, but the vending machine scene and the I swallowed a button scene that I brought up, those are usually the two sort of biggest laughs that people aren't expecting. And they kind of like, oh, you're going to make me watch Scooby-Doo. And then they kind of get a lot of joy out of those two jokes. And they're a little bit more willing to kind of explore sort of further in. Yeah,
I mean, good. It's amazing to me the you know, because it's so subjective. You know, episodes that I don't particularly care for or didn't really turn out. The restaurant one is not one of my favorites, but you know, I know a lot of people who rate that as one of their favorites, and you know. Of course, my opinion is always going to be sort of tainted by every writer. When they finish, they write the end on something. What they've imagined in their head is always going to be the best version of that movie or TV show or whatever, you know. Hopefully, if you're lucky, you're working with people who understand what you intend, and they'll plus it, and often moments or scenes will be even better than you thought because they added, you know, that scene at the beginning of Mystery 101 where Shaggy and Scooby, you know, he says, you know, I see a lot of snooty kids running away, and they say, really, which direction did they go? But we show that they're actually far away already when they say that. They do that sort of truck out. The director added that into that scene. That was not written that way, and it was much funnier that way. So, you know, the puppet falling scene was interpreted just beautifully. So when animation is a relay race. You're passing the baton from the writers to the storyboarders with the directors. It's going overseas to animators, to editors, the voice actors. You're constantly handing the baton, and every step of the way, there's a chance for the baton to get dropped. You know, it's rare that you'll get the entire relay race where the baton was never dropped at all. And I'm talking about in terms of the original intention of what was written, you know, but you do the best you can. It's a collaborative process. The Scooby-Doo crew was great, you know, and Warner Brothers allowed us to take a lot of chances and get away with murder on a lot of stuff. You know, they rarely pulled back on the reins in terms of sophistication or stuff that might go over a 6-year-old's head. You know, they had specific things that they did want, you know, but they were, you know, they got what we were doing. They liked what we were doing, and their notes are often about, you know, story and character and the important things, you know. They were supportive of our approach. So it was nice.
This might be a better question for Shant or Kyle, but the puppet joke, the puppet gag where it's falling in slow motion and then in real time into the shrub. I remember Chuck Jones once, in his Chuck Amuck book, he was talking about how they were so specific about the timing of gags that they would send them to the in-betweeners, and they'd be like, this has to be 12 frames, and if it came back 14 frames or 11 frames, they sent it back and said, do it again.
Right.
How specific was that gag? Because the timing on it is amazing. Like, it's so perfectly done.
Well, usually Zach and the director and Kyle would be in the editing room, and Zach would say, you know, cut 4 frames out of this and out of that. His sense of timing was always perfect, and he and I were very, very much one mind. He always understood what I was writing and what I meant. So he was always very, very good at interpreting those sort of things. Yeah, those things are very, very specifically timed. And I'm sure they experimented, they tried it in different ways. Laughter is the best test. Whatever made them laugh in the room the most is probably what they went with. They did it probably frame by frame, I would imagine. But I was in the editing room a lot. Certainly earlier on in the process, up until Zach left. And when they say, oh, a thing is made in editing, it is true to a great extent. You can certainly make a scene that simply doesn't work absolutely work. Like from, this scene should be cut, it doesn't work at all, to this is the best scene in the show, all with editing, all with timing. It's a remarkable process. And the guys who are good at it, this should be given a lot more credit. Kyle Stafford's a genius. I think he's brilliant at it. And, all of our directors are really good at it. Sean and Jeff, James Krensky, Andy, these are guys who know what they're doing. It was just a matter of teaching them what we were doing. What the tone is and what the flavor is, and then it became easier and easier for them to achieve that.
Okay, I think on that note we could probably end the discussion on Mystery 101.
Cool.
Thanks again so much for sitting down with us and talking about this episode, Jon. We appreciate your time and your insights.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, that's it for commentary on Mystery 101. I hope you all enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.
So there you have it. That brings a close to our audio commentary with Jon Colton Barry, writer and story editor for Be Cool Scooby-Doo. That was his episode Mystery 101. I hope you enjoyed listening to Jon speaking and the post-show interview that we kind of did afterwards. I really enjoyed touching base with Jon again, and I'm so glad that we finally got this commentary up and out. We've actually discussed doing a few more, finishing off Season 1, moving into Season 2. We're kind of jazzed about doing it, and as soon as release schedules and our schedules kind of coincide, we're going to get together, we're going to do that, so there'll be more fun to be had. Stay tuned. I want to thank Jon again for coming on the show and for taking the time to do this commentary. It's a little above and beyond. I'm thrilled when anybody chooses to do it. It offers some insight and perspective on the behind-the-scenes developing and writing and creation of these shows in this franchise that, let's face it, we all love, or we wouldn't even be here listening to this stuff and making this stuff. So thanks again, Jon. Look forward to talking to you again. And thank you so much for joining me. It makes it so much grander, so much better when you guys are out there, when you're listening, when you're paying attention, when you're enjoying what I am producing. And comments that I'm getting from people, very positive. The audio commentaries are being received very well, which just inspires me to want to kind of keep pushing, keep expanding, get more people in the air quote booth, so to speak, and pump out some added value content. Fun for the whole family. So if you have any comments on this episode or the show or anything whatsoever, you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/ScoobyDooCast. I'm on Twitter at ScoobyDooCast. And there's a blog named Scooby-Doo, which is the companion blog to the podcast, where I post reviews of comic books and articles and just whatever comes to mind and doesn't make it into the podcast. And lastly, if you get the show off of iTunes, while you're there, it only takes a minute. If you're downloading the show or listening to the show there, leave a review, give us a rating. 5 stars is obviously best, but I want to know what you really think. And if you leave a comment on iTunes or on any of the other social media specifically relating to the podcast, I will read those comments on a future episode of the show. So that wraps it up for this extra episode featuring an audio commentary with Jon Colton Barry. Thanks again so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time on a podcast named Scooby-Doo. Take care.